Tom, it's great seeing you, man. I mean, we were just talking busy times these days, huh? But more importantly, though, busy times for you with the music career. How have things been going, man?
You're saying it. It's busy. It's exhausting. I don't ever plan on retiring, so that's at least good because it looks like I won't be. But, staying busy keeps me out of trouble, probably keeps you out of trouble. And I think that as we get older, the trouble that we have to get into is a lot less fierce and sharp than it used to be. So, I think we're just, I think we're can admit that we're as happy as can be.
Definitely. And one of the things I'm mostly happy about is being in this business, being able to do so many interviews for so many years, being able to chance to talk to you and whatever band that you've been involved with. I mean, to me, that's always been a pleasure, man. But when I found out about this book, Beautiful Scars, it blew me away, man, because you think when you interview somebody and you get into their life and you talk about things, but then you just don't know the things that are going on in their lives. And for somebody like yourself, and we're going to talk about this book, there are things that you didn't know about that you had to discover at a late age in your life.
Yeah, that's right. It's it's a little bit crippling, emotionally, to live a life like this, not knowing really where you're from. Instead of not knowing, let's say, suspecting that you're in the wrong place. You're not always born in the place you're supposed to be, and that was my case.
Yeah, look, I'm going to read something here, and then I want to talk about it, because I think it's really important when you read the back of this. It says, once when I was about 4, I asked Bunny, how come I didn't look anything like you and George? How come you are old and the other moms are young? This is the one line that really blows me away. There are secrets I know about you that I will take to my grave, she responded. This is you at 4 years old. When you look at this and you hear this now, I mean, what is your reaction to something like this?
Well, hearing it now, I basically wrote that down. I wrote the whole book. The process of writing this book, which I officially call a 70,000-word love letter to the people who gave me a fighting chance and allowed possibilities to be there for me. A lot of anger came with this, because as you process why people would keep your identity and your heritage from you, are the same people that gave you this fighting chance and that loved the hell out of you, gave you everything that they had. So when that anger subsides, you're actually left with this beautiful crystal of love and hope, and so that anger washes away. I jokingly said writing this book saved me hundreds of thousands of dollars in therapy.
You know what? I believe that. But let's get to the core of this, because we've sort of talked around this. Uh-huh. This book is about your life and you discovering that your parents weren't actually your parents.
That's right. Bunny and George Wilson were older to begin with, which is why I asked, why it seemed like I was in the wrong place. George Wilson was blinded. He was from the Second World War. He's a tail gunner in the Second World War, and so the household was different than the other households on the street. But finding out that they weren't my mom and dad, that came as a complete mistake. I mean, it was just an off chance. I was going out to do some speaking lectures. And the person that they had road managing, handling me at the time, I got in the back of a limousine. She said, you don't know this, but my grandmother was friends with your family. And I said, I hear that a lot because of my last name, Wilson. I said, but my parents were older. My father was blind. They had no friends in Hamilton. The only people that ever got in the house were people who came down from Quebec. And she goes, oh, no, my grandmother's name is Mary Brennan. I said, oh my God, I remember that name, believe it or not, like from when I was a kid. And I said, my heart bust open, because I thought, this is amazing that Bunny, my mother, actually had a friend in Hamilton. She goes, yes, in fact, my grandmother was such close friends with Bunny, your mother, that she was there the day you were adopted. And I was like, what? I had no idea. I suspected, but suspicions are way different than fact.
Let's get into that too, because you do sort of you go over this. It's almost like a river flow with this book, man, which is what I find so incredible, because it's almost like all these little pieces that you feel around you. Talk a little bit about with the book when you do talk about there were certain things that you were just going, I got to put a question mark to that.
Yeah, there's a lot of question marks about my life. The fact that Bunny and George were quite a bit older than every other parent on the street. When I was brought into their household, I was they were like in their late 40s, early 50s, right? And I was a baby, so that was an odd situation. Also, finding out that they weren't my mother and father was something that I had to process. This book is actually the midst of me processing all this information that's coming into my life, still coming into my life. It's all written almost in real time, or in creative real time, in that I grew up an only child. I met 6 brothers and sisters back home in Ganawagi on the reserve, all Mohawks. And that, that was, I gave myself 6 months to a year to actually write about meeting them. So it was creative real time. It was me processing what I was writing, and getting ready to write and trying to find the most poetic and truthful version that I could tell.
Truth. Very important. You wrote a song about that, too. You talk about that.
Yeah, that's right. For this book in particular, I'm the last man standing. Everybody else protected my identity, like I was in some witness protection program. You know what I mean? And once this was revealed to me, once I found out that the woman who has acted as my cousin my entire life, the matriarch of our family, my only relative, really, before I found out I was adopted, my cousin Janie, who sits at the head of the table for Christmas and Easter and is for all the kids' birthday parties, I'm driving her home from one of these parties, and I said, Janie, I found out a couple years ago Mom and Dad were my mom and dad. If you ever feel comfortable enough to be able to talk about it with me, please come to me. And she just turned to me right then and said, Tom, I'm sorry, I don't know how to tell you, but I'm your mother. That revelation.
Well, you were driving?
I was driving her home. I suspected, like I say, the difference between suspecting, until that moment, it wasn't real. I questioned myself. I questioned myself my entire life because I thought and felt in my heart one thing, but the reality around me told me that I'm completely wrong, and that I felt almost like I was disrespecting the people who loved me by doubting them. Then it all just came. That was the beginning of finding out that Janie really was my mother. As I didn't suspect as much as I thought she could be my mother. Also, I found out that I grew up thinking I was a big, white, puffy, sweaty Irish guy my whole life. I ended up being a big, puffy, sweaty Mohawk guy, as it turns out.
But you were also a big music recording artist, and throughout all this that's been going on, you are still creating a music career too, and you go over this too in your book.
Yeah, well, you got to come out swinging if you're going to survive as an artist. I always wanted to be an artist. I never wanted to be anything else, and I still have a music career. I just finished a tour. I just finished doing beautiful concert halls from Massey Hall, across the country, and that's still a major part of my life, but it's only one part of my creative life. It's not necessarily how my self-doubt affected my creative life. It's how my self-doubt about who I was affected my day-to-day life, which was I lost myself in drugs and alcohol, like a lot of people do. I've been clean and sober 18 years, but I was when you're not sure about what is going on around you, you got to look inside. You got to look deep inside, and when you look deep inside and you don't know who you are, then you have to somehow compensate for that. I'm not making excuses for my abusive ways. I'm just saying that at least I have a little bit of an answer about what I was going through. And also, just to mention, you look back at who you are. Any of us look back at who we were 20, 25 years, 30 years ago. We really don't recognize those people anymore. We know who they were, but we don't really recognize, we don't know how that feels to be I don't know what it feels like to be the guy that I wrote about in this book.
2 words. We mentioned the word truth. There's also the word lie. Which of the words gave you most comfort, and which of those words gave you the most pain?
I've lived in a world between 2 worlds. I've lived in a world growing up on 162 East 36th Street in Hamilton, East Mountain. That's one place I grew up. The ghosts and the spirits and the energy was coming from my Mohawk family back home in Ganawage. So living between those 2 worlds, I've been the man in between my entire life. I've been in the no man's land. I've been in that little patch of field, like World War I, between the fighting, between the 2 adversaries. And that's where I've been. And so as far as truth and lies go, I don't find real comfort in either one of those places because I kind of live in between it. What this book managed to pry out of me was the pride of being the last man standing and being here to be able to tell the truth.
What do you hope people get from this book? Because there could be somebody else who is living this same situation out there.
I've been talking about this on stage for 2 years, 3 years now, talking about, the story in a very short. Every night I come off stage and somebody in the audience comes up to me and says, my uncle was adopted. I found out that the woman who's acted as my sister my entire life is actually my mother. Every family has a story. I've had bikers standing in lobbies of theaters in Winnipeg, Manitoba saying, I know this story because it's my story. So the story of adoption and the story of skeletons in the closets for our families, all of us, it's a common thread, and it's something we can all relate to. I just finished an interview with a newspaper writer whose husband found out the same thing at the age of 42. So it's like, this is a common thread. My story is unique in that it's mine, and that I tried to bring, like I say, as much love and as much poetry to the telling of it.
And I'm just glad that you're able to share this with us. Thank you so much for doing this interview. Thank you so much for the interviews over the past. Thank you so much for the music, but more importantly, man, thank you for the friendship.
Thank you. Appreciate it.